All opinions and views expressed by the speakers are not representative of views and opinions of RBC Dominion Securities, Inc. All information and opinions provided in this video are in good faith, but without legal responsibility.
Welcome back to Reformed Millennials, the podcast where finances, economic trends, and sports intersect. Cam and Joel help listeners better invest their time and money. Also, it's important for listeners to understand that investing in equities, fixed income instruments, and/or alternative asset classes involves substantial risk of loss. Any action you may take as a result of the information presented in this podcast is your own responsibility. The information in this podcast is presented as a general educational, informational, and entertainment resource only. While Joel is registered to provide investment advice, this podcast does not provide individualized investment, tax, or insurance advice, nor is it meant as a recommendation to any listener to buy or sell any specific securities or otherwise take any other form of investment action. This is an excerpt of the full legal disclaimer that's available on the landing page of this podcast, which includes whether Cam Pitchers or Joel Shackleton have any ownership or interest in the specific securities discussed in this podcast.
Good morning, Melissa. Welcome back to the pod.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. I feel like I need to start with the date and the time because we have no idea what's going to end up happening post. So it's Tuesday, December 17th. It's about 10:15 in the morning here in Mountain Time. What a week it's been for you.
And it's only Tuesday morning. My goodness. I thought this was going to be like a nice, tidy up client things, get ready for the new year. We know we're going to see a lot of change in 2025, but I mean, there is no rest for the wicked in Canadian.
Absolutely not. Sure. That Liz Lemon meme is so appropriate right now.
Yeah.
And
I was thinking of Nancy Pelosi when she goes up to the podium and she says, "I won't say good morning because it most certainly is not."
Absolutely. So the reason why I wanted to chat with you, I think it's quite obvious. What I'm hoping to accomplish in this conversation is to first sort out what has happened, and then get your insight into what we should expect to happen over the next couple of weeks / 2 months, and then we can kind of pontificate about what we believe to be important and perhaps dive deeper into policy and the politics of everything. But right now, I'd like for you to kind of set the board, help people understand what's happened, what's likely to happen over the next couple of weeks, and kind of set the record straight.
Sure. So there are actually a lot of different things happening concurrently here. And so there's a lot happening. We'll try and make it super easy for everybody to understand. But for most people listening, probably they have heard that Canada's former Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, longtime Liberal cabinet minister, Trudeau, inner circle, well respected, relatively speaking, as far as senior members of the Liberal cabinet goes, posted on X on Monday morning around 9 a.m. Eastern that she was stepping down as the Minister of Finance, still remaining in Liberal caucus and still intending to run again in the next election. She posted this one-page letter publicly on X, which essentially alleged that she had been approached by the Prime Minister on Friday about taking a different role within cabinet. She has said that she doesn't think that suits her sort of vision for the country with respect to the direction that Trudeau is trying to take things, notably from a fiscal perspective, and so made the decision to step back, firing several different jabs within this letter. Very well-written letter, very strategic letter, by the way, which we can get into, but basically just factually saying that she can no longer serve in his cabinet. Now, that happened the morning of the scheduled fall economic statement, which is essentially a midway review that the Government of Canada regularly provides to Parliament about how Canada's fiscal situation is compared to how they said it would be in the budget, which was tabled in April. So she announces that she's resigning via X through this letter the morning of the fiscal update. Now, concurrently, there was also a by-election that was happening in Langley-Cloverdale in British Columbia yesterday. We can get into the results of that. The 10 premiers were meeting in Mississauga for the Council of the Federation meeting to discuss any number of issues that provinces are facing. And Trudeau had a Liberal fundraiser last night, and today he has a Liberal holiday party. And today is the last day of question period, last day of the sitting day of the year until mid-January. So, and tomorrow there were rumors that there was going to be a cabinet shuffle already, even before Freeland announced that she would step down. So a ton happening, and all sort of interrelated in various different ways. But certainly the bombshell of Freeland saying she's going to step down is the big news that's coming out of the last couple of days.
Holy. So where should we double click on here? Honestly, the strategy I think is most important, because I think that's the thread I'd like to pull on first. So Freeland doing this on that specific day felt like it had the most impact.
It had a lot of impact for sure, but the reason she was sort of able to do this on this day is because the Prime Minister, if how the events Freeland alleges unfolded the way that she says they did, which we don't have a reason to believe they didn't, this is the Prime Minister who was making a decision by telling Freeland, hey, on Friday, we're going to put you in a new portfolio. Can you please take one for the team and present this horrendous fall economic statement on Monday? And then, by the way, let me shuffle you out of that role that you've had and likely put in, many people are rumoring would have been Mark Carney, an unelected male, into this role that you have stewarded over the past several years. So even though she, dunked in a very strategic way, and I think is very well, she holds a lot of power in this situation. She didn't start it, but she has certainly finished it in a way, for sure.
100%. So let's kind of talk about that the fall economic update. It is, to my understanding, that they had projected a $48.3 billion deficit for 24-25, and the actual reality of that is it's going to be a lot closer to 62 billion. 61.9, I think, is what the rumored, not rumored, but what was released. So that is, by all accounts, a pretty egregious miss in terms of projection. So her not wanting to deliver that seems obvious as to why. The fact that she was getting moved off that file is not a surprise either. The way what I'm looking at is, okay, they missed by 20 billion in terms of their projected outcome. Why? What did they miss on? What's going on?
So very good question. So the fall economic statement provides almost a past and future analysis of what we're looking at. So I'm going to start by reviewing some of the numbers that you just mentioned that have to do with how did the fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2024 actually shake out. When we had the budget in April, we were seeing projections from the government on how the year was going to finish off. And the government had projected that the end of fiscal 23-24 would have a $40 billion deficit. And it is actually 61.9 billion. So that's actually what happened last year.
Okay, got it.
This fiscal economic update also projects what we are anticipate this current fiscal year that we're in is going to finish on. Whereas the budget in April projected that this fiscal year would be about a $40 billion, $39.8 billion deficit. They're now projecting that it's going to be a $48.3 billion deficit. And the reason why that's relevant is because the reason why last year's fiscal numbers were off is for a couple of reasons. There were a couple of things that sort of factored into that. One is about $16.4 billion in Indigenous contingent liabilities. So this is liabilities that happened in the courts, as well as $4.7 billion in COVID-19 related adjustments. My assumption is that Chrystia Freeland's resignation isn't about what happened last year, though what happened last year is further evidence that Canada is not in a strong fiscal situation. What I think that Chrystia Freeland was probably upset by is what the government was projecting to do into this year and how that was going to have us finish at the end of this fiscal year, which includes several announcements that the government has committed to this year. The first is, we heard about this a couple of weeks ago, the GST holiday, which is estimated to cost about $1.6 billion. That's in the fiscal update. That's a budgeted item that they are going to spend money on. What is not in the fiscal update, and what many are alleging is a reason why Chrystia Freeland and the Prime Minister were at odds, is the Working Canadians rebate, these $250 checks that the Liberals had also promised at the same time as those GST rebates, which is estimated to cost between $6 and $7 billion. That second promise, those rebates, is not included in the fiscal update. So I imagine that Freeland's objection is not necessarily what happened last year, so associated with that $61.9 billion number that is being talked about, but what the government is proposing for this year and beyond.
Okay, understood. So she wasn't getting, or they weren't agreeing on how they're going to proceed moving forward, and she felt as though it was high time for her to get out. That makes a lot of sense. I don't really want to go too much deeper onto like why they're missing, where the tax revenue is going, those sorts of things. We can discuss that a little bit later. But now that we have the two party leaders, the NDP and Conservative Party leaders, coming out and saying that they no longer have confidence in the Prime Minister, what's next? Does he resign? He still hasn't. It's the middle of the day today. Before our conversation, you had kind of alluded to the idea that he likely is not going to. How are the dominoes going to fall from here if you were to guess?
Yes. So it's important that we sort of look within our parliamentary democracy, the sort of mechanisms available for the government to fall and then an election to happen, and then the strategy behind why the Prime Minister would or would not choose any of those options. So the ways that we go, the next federal election is scheduled for October 20th of 2025. The way that we have an election before that legislated fixed election date is if the government, so the Liberal minority government, loses confidence of the House of Commons. Now, the way that the government can lose confidence of the House of Commons is through a vote of confidence motion, which we've seen several of those already that have failed from opposition members this past fall, or if the government has to, or if the parliament has to vote on what's called a matter of supply and confidence, which is typically related to a speech from the throne and a budget presentation. So the only way that the parliament can force the government to fall or force an election to happen is if one of those two things happens. Now, today is the last day of Parliament. It's not going to happen today. There's no room in the schedule for something like that to happen. So the government's not going to fall because of a confidence motion right now. So we are likely, Parliament returns mid to late January, and then maybe there'll be another opportunity for a confidence motion where the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and the Conservatives can say, hey, we don't have confidence in the Liberal government anymore. The Liberals would lose that motion if they voted in that way, and then the Parliament would dissolve and we'd go to an election. Now, the Prime Minister has some legislative tools at his disposal. He can do something what's called proroguing, which essentially stops parliamentary proceedings, gets rid of everything that's currently happening at a committee and legislative level in this session, and it basically puts the Parliament on pause. Now, the Prime Minister may want to do that because then that sort of takes away the ability for a confidence motion. If you're not sitting in the House of Commons, then you can't actually vote on a confidence motion. So some people are saying, just to answer your question, what's going to happen? Some people are saying maybe the prime minister is going to announce this week that he's going to prorogue parliament. Maybe he's going to do that and try to buy some time and see if he can fix things with his caucus, but he probably won't have much luck for that. So he can prorogue, or he can resign, or he can do a combination of both. So he can prorogue and stay on. He can prorogue and announce that he's resigning, which would initiate a Liberal Party of Canada leadership race, or he can resign and not prorogue. So there's any number of things that can happen. I, as you mentioned, don't think that Trudeau will resign this week, because I think that makes him look like he's on the defense and responding to Freeland. I think the more likely situation is that he, may or may not prorogue this week, but he will wait until January either way to formally announce that he is resigning, which I do believe is inevitable. It's just a matter of timing at this point.
Okay. I mean, it's quite the drag to be operating a business in a country that doesn't have leadership at the top of government or confidence in that leadership. It's pretty terrible for all levels of business. So this is selfish across the board. It really feels as though we're in a really difficult position given the American situation, the tweets that are being thrown at us. It's disrespectful, and now it just feels as though we're in limbo, and it's really, really difficult. So let's say he resigns and goes any one of those three routes. Is it likely that he runs for leadership? If he does run for leadership within the Liberal Party, what do you think? You think he can win?
He will not run for leadership of the Liberal Party. No? He will go away into the night. There is a virtually non-existent chance that he would win that leadership vote. He has 60 members of his 150-some member caucus calling for his resignation. He has no credibility at this point within caucus and within the party, because polling is just like he would not choose to run in that leadership. This would be the end of his time as the Liberal leader and prime minister if he resigned.
Okay, in that case, then you then have a Liberal leadership run. Who are the candidates there?
So it's customary for people to not really say until it's considered sometimes disrespectful while there's a sitting leader in place and there's no leadership election for people to sort of say things. But I'll tell you the names that are being thrown around. So from within the Liberal caucus, we have a few different names that are often thrown around. So Chrystia Freeland, definitely somebody who is seen as somebody who could do that job. She had sort of struggled in the past with her close connectedness to Trudeau. This probably changes that, which is why it's a smart political decision for her to make that decision. You have François-Philippe Champagne, who is seen as somebody who might want the job as well. He's industry and innovation. You have Mélanie Joly, currently foreign affairs minister. Again, I'm not suggesting that these names are necessarily palatable to the public, but these are the people who are talking about it. And then for outsiders, you have two sort of notable outsiders that have been rumored to be interested in the job. The first is Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, current advisor to the Liberals on economic policy. And then there's also Christy Clark, former BC Liberal premier in British Columbia. So those are the sort of five that are being talked about most right now, but that could change in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, so what is the likely outcome for our new leadership race? I don't want you to say who's going to win. When would we see a new prime minister?
So when it kind of starts with whenever the prime minister resigns or is not in that role anymore. There's no mechanism wherein caucus can tell him to resign. Like, he has to make that decision himself. So there's sort of a clock that starts from that point. So let's say he resigns. When he resigns, the Liberal Party of Canada has I think it's 47 days or 27 days, I can't remember, to release, to meet and release rules on what the rules of that Liberal Party leadership race would be. A leadership race could be anywhere from a month to 4 months. And then after that, if the person who becomes leader is already a sitting MP, then they would simply assume the role of prime minister and sit in parliament. If the person who wins that leadership race is not an MP, they could still become the prime minister, but in order to actually sit in parliament, they need to run in a by-election to actually become an MP. So it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 months to 6 months if we look at the timing, and that's if he does something right away. It could be shorter than that, but I mean, realistically speaking, we're
looking at spring.
Yes, at the earliest. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the incentives do not fall. And
by the way, try getting somebody to run for a political party that is trailing behind the Conservatives by more than 20 points. And there is nobody right now that may become leader of the Liberal Party, certainly not people who are in caucus, that can probably fill that gap. So not only are you running for the Liberal Party on the heels of an election, there's a very, very small likelihood that you are in a position to win that election. So you're essentially running to become leader of the opposition.
Which is not exactly a sexy position. It's effectively what the Conservative Party has been doing for the last 9 years.
Without the hope of like the Conservatives will win a majority, you're going to be in that seat for 4+ years. So.
Yeah. Not an attractive job.
No, definitely not. Which is why the calls from opposition parties now are telling the Liberals, Trudeau to simply, because Trudeau can call an election. Trudeau can go to the Governor General and ask for Parliament to be dissolved, and we can be in an election. We can be in an election later this afternoon. Like writs of election can be issued later this afternoon, and we can be in an election, and we can have an election at the end of January if Trudeau wants. And that's why opposition parties are saying there needs to be an election. It's now no longer a matter of Liberal leadership, because the Liberals have lost confidence of the public. And so in order for that wrong to be righted, there needs to be an election. And so that's why there's sort of this difference between, Trudeau can resign, but really the opposition parties want an election. The reason why the Liberals and the NDP don't want that is because the Liberals are going to go from 154 seats, I think they have right now, to like 50 at the most.
Oh my goodness, 100 jobs.
Yes, and there's a lot of considerations there that people are weighing in what to do next.
So if I were to guess, as I was kind of alluding to, the incentives do not point to a snap election here. So it's very likely that we're looking at spring, summer, and that this gets dragged out, which is terrible for the Canadian economy.
I will correct you on one thing.
Okay.
So we are going to see a budget in April at some point. Budgets are matters of confidence. And if they lose that vote, we will go to an election. So I do believe that, the timelines are different. Do I believe that there could be a sort of 6-month period until we see a fully installed elected MP Liberal leader, a new one? Yes, we could see an election as early as April starting, because if the government doesn't win that confidence vote, they cannot go on.
But you would assume, given that these folks don't want to lose their position early, they don't want to lose their seat by the beginning of the year, first quarter of the year, you would assume that they would vote in confidence of that budget.
But they don't have a majority. Like, they do not have a majority in the House of Commons. They've been held up by NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his party that agree to vote with them. But Jagmeet gets his pension as of February, and Jagmeet is not going to win, and the NDP are not going to win the seats that they can win if they continue to support this government in that budget. So it is unlikely that they would pass that confidence vote at this point.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of predictive politics here. I'm of the opinion that it's likely that the Conservative government end up winning a majority. That's my view. But again, I'm a biased Albertan, so we don't really know anything. We have our feelings, and they aren't represented by the most of Canada. I think that it's likely that we get that Conservative majority. What happens in the NDP party? Like, does Jagmeet Singh remain leader? Is there any sort of shakeup there that's likely?
So that'll be for them to decide. He's
Okay.
been leader for several years now, and it is sort of customary after losing a few elections that there would be a change in leader. And again, to be cynical, he would have his pension at that point. So I don't know why there wouldn't be a leadership election in the NDP. So yeah, I do think that if, following the next election, we are likely to see a change in leadership at the NDP level, unless the NDP is by some way able to steal so much Liberal support that they markedly increase their seat count in the next election. Again, unlikely, possible, but plausible.
Okay, so if Jagmeet steps aside, he's no longer the NDP leader, who are the likely replacements for him in that party? Do you know?
I honestly have no idea. I have not been paying attention at all to what's going on there because it's not really that consequential to what is going to happen in the next 12 months. There could be some folks internally, there could be some folks externally. It's not an incredibly strong caucus right now. Like, this isn't the NDP of Jack Layton. So again, they're not really going to be in a position to lead that. I mean, could we see somebody like Rachel Notley or somebody else get in the mix for that? Sure. I mean, as an Albertan, I'd love to see that. But there's not really like names floating around for the NDP in the same way that there are for the Liberals.
Fair enough. Okay. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the Conservative policy of Pierre. I feel as though there hasn't been a lot tabled at the moment. He talks about the carbon tax. That to me is kind of a nothing policy. It's sure it has a one-time impact on cost of goods. Is there any more depth to his policy? What has he talked about?
There is definitely more depth to his policy, just not in the public square at this point, and that is by design. I have a lot of friends in the CPC and know a lot of folks that are working really hard on developing a pretty robust policy plan, but there is literally no political reason for him to talk about that at all right now, so he's not going to. You won't actually hear probably about conservative policies beyond the axe the tax until the second or third week of the campaign, like the debate. Like, you will not hear about anything specific until that point.
See, this is where the incentives are not aligned with politics, how you vote your leadership, how they run for office, and the actual needs of Canadian business. We need clarity. You need somebody to give you some insight. You cannot attract investment without having any clue what tax policy is going to be like in 12 months. It is kind of sad. And if you think about, and this is where I sit, right, where I have to now take an approach from a portfolio management perspective and try to allocate for clients based on where I view Canada going. And it's really, really difficult to gain any sort of perspective on where we're going to go. Like, we can assume, okay, we believe we're going to have a conservative government leadership and it's going to have a majority, but there's no policy for me to kind of sift through other than there being a tax, axe the carbon tax. And that to me has almost zero impact on GDP. So it has a little bit, but nothing meaningful. And perhaps people listening to this are going to say, Joel, you're being silly. Your carbon tax has been terrible. Well, honestly, it's much more important for us to hear about where corporate taxes are going, where his income taxes are going to fall, what they're going to do with the amortization tax, like the amortization policy, where you're able to write down capital equipment in year one. All of these things are much more important to me and to people that are investing in the country than the carbon tax. So I don't know, I'm a little bit jaded at this point. I'm disappointed. But with all that said, at the darkest times, it's often the best time to start putting money to work, and it's often the beginning of something new and great. And for that, I'm very optimistic about Canada. I view the American economy is absolutely on fire right now, and they need us. Whether or not Donald Trump respects us does not. That's not actually the point. They still need to buy our goods. We love to sell into their country. We are positioned incredibly well. So I'm hopeful that things falling apart lead to something more beautiful down the road. So Mel, I don't know if there's anything else we should be touching on. Is there anything that we missed? Is there anything in Alberta that's going on that matters?
Well, we have a by-election in Lethbridge West happening tomorrow as well, though nobody is paying attention to that. So we have a by-election happening in Alberta tomorrow as well.
Really?
I think we do, yes. It won't really change anything because the UCP has a majority, but Shannon Phillips stepped down from her seat there, and that's actually a very interesting riding because it's usually won or lost with less than like 2% of the vote. So okay. It's a very interesting riding. It's always a very close one. I think the main thing for folks to understand just broadly, I take your point on everything that you've just described. Broad strokes doesn't help you allocate your capital and sort of plan for the future. You are 95% likely to see a conservative government. You can expect decreased here's some things I think that folks in the tech sector and sort of the innovation space can look to and anticipate. You are going to see government, I believe, getting out of the business of being venture capitalists. And they're going to create policies that encourage private capital and capital markets to become freed up so that the private sector can take care of that work. So if you are a company that has based most of your fundraising and capital raises on government funding, I would titrate down your expectations for that, because I don't believe that's something that's ideologically aligned with the next government. That's not to say there'll be no innovation funding, but you're not going to, I believe, have access to the same amount of funding unless you can sort of prove that it has a return on investment. You're going to see, I think, reduction in red tape as much as possible and make sort of provincial dollars contingent on addressing the housing crisis and increasing supply there. That's not an easy fix, and that's not something that even the Conservatives alone can do, but you will definitely see policies that are more catered to that. You will see, I think, some pretty significant cuts to the public sector with respect to not public services, but the administration of the federal government. You will see some changes to CBC and Radio Canada. You will see increases to military spending, I believe, to hit that 2% NATO target. And you will see some combination of adjustment to taxes in personal, corporate, and capital gains. There will be a strategic approach there, I believe. I don't think that the Conservatives are just going to come in and cut all of those, because economically it's actually not smart to just do blanket cuts that way. But you will see tax policy that certainly, I think, rewards individuals who deploy capital in the economy and allows them to sort of continue to do so in a way that we've just not seen in the Canadian economy. So that's broad strokes. But again, these things take time as well. So you might have some clarity in the next 12 months, but the impacts of those things, and then add on the 25% tariffs we're expecting from the United States, add on what's geopolitical things that are happening in the Middle East and China and elsewhere, all of these things contribute to what we're seeing in Canada. But broad strokes, I think that's what folks can expect.
I think what's really important to point out here is that markets price 9 to 12 months in the future. Yeah. So if you view Canada as being in its toughest, darkest time today, but there being great opportunity and perhaps a lot of this policy change start to work its way through the system, 18 months from now looks really good. And for me, that's exciting. That means opportunity abound. And I really appreciate the fact that you identified all the things that I've been clamoring about on this podcast politically for quite some time. I'm of the opinion that America is amazing because they have the deepest secondary capital markets in the world. They are not when you're an entrepreneur and you're there, you do not require government capital to get something done.
Yep.
They, in the past, call it the 1940s, when you had the Manhattan Project, it was financed by the government. Sure, that's absolutely true. Today, the largest innovations are made by the deepest pockets in the world, which are their individual entrepreneurs. So you see all of these incredible innovations coming out of Google. Google's the new Bell Labs. So I'm hopeful that we can start to institute a few of the same things that America has been able to accomplish over the last 25 years, which is to incentivize their entrepreneurs to build great things. They get to then keep their winnings, their capital, and then redeploy it in new entrepreneurs. Those people that are coming up, the young people with great, beautiful ideas. The fact that Silicon Valley doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world is not a surprise. It's because their tax policy is different. Their incentives are different. And as a result of that, the people that live in America act differently.
Yes.
So if we can start to reshift the way in which Canadians think about opportunity, about investment, about innovation, I really believe that is going to be kind of it's a boon for our economy, and it'll be great for young people, for people like you and I that are, I would call us in the middle of our adulthood at this point. I just view it as being quite exciting. So hopefully that is a result. I don't know if there's anything I can add. The 25% tariff thing, again, who knows? To predict whether or not Donald Trump is going to do something is a fool's errand. You never actually know. It seems as though our premiers are on a different page than our prime minister is, where they're trying their darndest to be eliminated from his 25%, and that makes everybody look weak. But nonetheless, everyone's trying their darndest to avoid it. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to be able to do so. I'm not sure if you've heard anything either. Do you believe that is going to happen for sure?
The 25% tariff? Yeah. I believe it will happen. I think that with the right horse trading, i.e., deals on critical minerals that provide strategic materials that the U.S. needs, that doesn't want to rely on China for, via border security issues, via negotiation tactics upcoming in USMCA negotiations in 2026. I think that perhaps there could be some exemptions to that. But okay. If I'm Trump, I have absolutely no reason to not do that, especially now with the weak leadership that we're seeing in Canada.
Yeah. That is very interesting to me. The first quarter of the upcoming 25 is going to be volatile.
Yes.
To think that Donald Trump is going to come in and not shake things up is obviously not going to happen. He's going to be a bull in the china shop. And I would venture to guess that yes, the 25% goes on. And he's going to start negotiating quickly, and he's going to have executive orders flying around, and it's going to cause the market to be volatile. And whether or not and how that affects Canada and Alberta more specifically, I'm finding it difficult to figure out how that benefits him, because by any account, a 25% tariff on Canadian exports into and American imports of Canadian goods into is going to be inflationary. And if he is going to be the anti-inflation president, none of that policy makes any sense. I think he knows that, and maybe he's going to spend a lot of his political capital trying to negotiate those deals at the beginning and allow there to be a little bit of inflation early to then let it sift away late. But if you're listening to this podcast, I view Q1 of this year as being ultra important. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how things roll out and shake out. So, Mel, I really appreciate you kind of cleaning everything up for me and setting the table, because I'm reading Twitter all day yesterday, or X, and I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was true and what wasn't true. So it's really helpful to be kind of aligned, and then you can have a pretty clear path as to where the leadership, the prime minister leadership, is going to end up over the next 3 to 9 months. It seems as though I get it now. So thank you.
No problem. And I think I would just encourage listeners as well. Like, I know that politics, especially in the last 6 months or so with the US election, et cetera, often touches emotional chords and feels very personal and moral in some ways. All I would say is that politics in Canada and the United States and elsewhere follows a very, very consistent mechanics. And it just depends on who's in the chair of the machine that sort of is pulling on the levers. And so I would say that as much as we can avoid ascribing morality to political decisions that are happening, if the Conservatives were in the spot that the Liberals were in right now, my commentary would be exactly the same. And so one is not good, one is not bad, one is not moral, and one is not immoral. I think we need to remove our thinking about those things and really just look at the policies that are suited for the time that we're in and that meet the moment. And I would encourage people to look at politics that way and try to depersonalize it as much as you can. I know that's difficult, but that's really how we'll end up being able to figure out who we think is best for the country moving forward.
Well, I'm hopeful that we get a change. We need this dollar to pick back up and go the other direction. I was reading it apparently
1.4. I was in New York and I was like, this is not affordable. I cannot be traveling in US dollar jurisdictions until this changes. My goodness.
It's unbelievable. I mean,
yeah.
Shoot, this is the lowest our dollar's been versus the US dollar since 1998.
Yeah. Yeah. They already try to fleece you in New York with how expensive cocktails are. I can be paying $50 for for a drink. I don't even like to drink. So
yeah, this is silly. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you so much, Mel. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Joel. Take care.